Welcome back to the Chi podcast. For this one, I would like to welcome Catherine from Willow Healing. She is an author with a second book on the way. She's an intuitive coach and healer. And here is Catherine.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, Jeremy.
No worries. It's cool that we were able to connect through beautiful threads.
Yes. Such a different take on social media and so much more positivity floating on that
Absolutely.
platform. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot more about the substance of content in terms of being more text-based, being more engaging. Yeah, it really seems to be cultivating a good culture, which I'm liking.
Yeah, agreed. And everyone's cheering on everybody else. So if anyone needs some empowerment or upliftment, check out Threads. I very rarely say that I've had a journey with social media, but it was a nice platform to stumble into.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The first podcast I did this year was actually through someone from Threads as well. And yeah, I really appreciate a good connection. So we're going to talk about a fairly spiritually orientated podcast for this one. Some topics ranging from synchronicity. Something that piqued my interest actually was when you were describing what you do, and you were termed it as spiritual epigenetics, which I think is a cool term. And what I wanted to ask you about is the book that you're writing around spiritual ethics. So what would you say spiritual ethics is about? What are spiritual ethics? What brought the book about?
So when I started my spiritual journey, I had a spiritual mentor and she would channel through for me. So she would connect with my higher self and my spirit team to get the best message and the advice to move forward. And as I started to unpack my spiritual gifts and step through the veil, all of a sudden I was like, hey, maybe I can do what you do for me with other people and help people along at that higher level. And so my question was, how can I do it? And from that, she actually got quite a big download, and the download was all these guidelines and things about ethics. And it was funny because we were just talking the weeks before saying how we know a lot of people in the spiritual community that claim that they are doing things for people and then they tend out not to be very good, or people feel very dependent on them instead of being empowered. They end up with this, not even victim's the wrong word, but this relationship where they feel they can't do anything without that mentor or without that guide. And also I had a friend who went to this group psychic reading, and she got told this information that really impacted on her, and she ended up with post-traumatic stress disorder from it because the information was true and then it turned out not to be true. And it was this whole big drama around that. And it just made me really upset because I really like to hold myself in a higher integrity, and there's no judgment there. It's just, that doesn't resonate with me. So this big download came through with all this information, and they originally were 7 pillars. So these pillars of conduct, if you will, or kind of guidelines for us to follow, stay in a higher vibration, to be able to serve people and to be able to, let people see people as equal. That's a big one. One's actually equality. So, when people come to you, they're not less than, they're not broken, they are whole. And it's just there because they want to change and change their journey or change their trajectory or get some assistance so their body can have some relief. So remembering those factors and coming in. And then as I started writing the book, it just started expanding. And I've been sitting on this for probably a year and a half, and I just kept getting more nudges to do it. And then more information kept coming to light. So now there's a groundwork and a foundation and a keystone. So it's these beautiful pillars all interacting together. And then they've linked into your chakras as well. So your energy centers, and then it links into crystals and guides and plants and animals. And I was like, this is getting huge. But, that's I'm still editing it. And even today, I was like, yeah, I'm going to get through 4 chapters of editing. Instead, I've done like 1.5 because the chapter I chose, which was willingness to change, which is really interesting. I had to add in this whole extra section. And the cool thing is when I write my books is I get like it all channels through. So I get all the downloads. It's not even me writing it. And then I read back over it and I'm like, wow, I wrote that through some spiritual guidance, but that's great.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Sometimes, like something I wrote that I probably channeled to a degree 4 years ago, I'm reflecting back to, and I'm actually going, and I'm like, wow, that version of me really like got onto some stuff. I wish I could tap into that right now.
Exactly. And I just sit there and I'm like, I don't even know what I'm typing. And even the first book that I just submitted to a publisher, it was a fiction novel, but I channeled the whole thing and I was like reading the book as I was typing it. It was the coolest way to write a book,
Absolutely. And
not me at all. Yeah.
And I'm guessing when it's kind of coming through you, it's just flowing so much that you can be so productive with what comes through so quickly, right?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So yeah, and then I don't know what this book will be called yet. It's evolved. That's what I mean. It's evolving. But the basis is, we have ethics for everything else. If you've ever worked in any industry, there's always like a code of conduct or a code of ethics, but there's no kind of standard for spiritual workers, psychics, Reiki, whatever it might be, to actually go back to and say, hey, how can I improve my practice? And how can I, feel like I'm doing the best I can and serving at the highest and greatest good level with integrity for benefiting myself and also the soul that's coming to work with me, who I'm serving. So that's how it came about. That's how it evolved. It's
Yeah.
evolving. And I've even been interviewing practitioners and clients saying, hey, what would you want to know? Because I want to make it as much as for practitioners to go to, but people who are starting on their spiritual journey, just having those ideas of questions to ask, what to look out for, how it's okay to, stop seeing somebody because they don't resonate with you anymore. Sometimes we have this loyalty or this false loyalty where we feel like, oh, but they've helped me through so much, but we outgrow each other because we change, and you don't have to have that loyalty anymore. You can actually make that conscious decision and give gratitude. Thank you. They helped me so much, but they're not for me anymore. It's time for me to change or move.
Totally.
Whatever it might be.
Yeah. Being able to recognize when you've completed the journey with them because they've taken you to the depth that they have met themselves, or the amount of whatever transformation they can share with you. It's really good that you are writing a book on ethics, because that is so needed in the spiritual community, especially like something I've seen and witnessed, tarot readers, maybe the older ones that have had many people really kind of dependent on them, like every week or month. What now? And, I'm sure that's good for their income stream, but is that in the highest interest of the person that's now basically giving all their power to that person? And something I've personally experienced is a tarot reader that's actually told me, oh no, you are X, Y, Z, and this is your future. And yeah, there was a lot of ego that was coming through into what she was saying, her own personal bias. And yeah, that had a dramatic effect on me, because at the time I rejected it, but then over time it planted a seed where I think what the problem can be, people typically are in a state of uncertainty looking for answers, which primes them to an openness of vulnerability that if someone goes, oh, no, you are XYZ and you need to do this. This is what your future says. And they're like, oh, okay. That can be a recipe for danger and disaster there. If someone gives all of their power to someone that's also used to acting with such level of certainty.
Yeah. And I guess two things are ringing for me when you were saying that. So, this is a level of spiritual responsibility too, which is another pillar that comes through, which is we have to be really mindful of what we tell people, and we have to be really conscious, especially if you're a tarot reader or a psychic or a seer or whatever it might be, because the information you get at the time is right for that moment. Because you can walk out the door and make a completely different choice, and all of a sudden you're on a whole new trajectory. So, when you give that information, I always stress, this is the information for right here, right now. You can choose to change this. You can choose to move forward. And even sometimes, I remember I had this one client, and I got shown that if he made this one choice, his whole life would be in alignment. So he would find his soulmate, he would find the perfect job, he would find the place he wants to live. But I couldn't tell him. My guides were like, we're showing you this so you can guide him, but you cannot make the decision for him, because it's going to stop him from achieving and learning as a soul what he needs to in this lifetime. So, which is what you were kind of saying with the tarot reader, because then you're putting yourself in a box and thinking, oh, but I'm doing this, and then if I do this, then I'm going to become this person, but I don't want to be that person. So instead of running towards that, which might have helped you learn different aspects and help you learn, whatever soul contracts you might have or whatever lessons you need to learn, you're all of a sudden getting put on a different trajectory. And it's almost disrespectful, because it's dishonoring your soul. And it's even the same as, it can go the other way too, where you get too much information that you're not ready for yet. So
can happen through psychedelics as well. Like for a lot of people I've seen.
Yeah, 100%. So even I have another client, and she had her gifts unpacked really quickly, but she wasn't ready for it. And she didn't have a practice where she could protect her energy or protect what was happening. And her house ended up full of spirits, because it was kind of like she turned on her spirituality, and it was like flinging the door open with a big sign saying, neon sign, I'm here, come get me, come to.
Yeah, open energy with no protection.
Yeah. And she wasn't ready for that. So then she had to shut it all back down. And then when she was open to it again, we had to work really hard and get her a lot of protection. And for her, what worked was connecting with the spirit animal, because her spirit animal is this big, proud bear, like really strong. And that's what helped her connect back spiritually, because she needed that knowing that she could be protected. So it can go the other way, where you have too much too quickly too. So
yeah.
It makes it sound like, oh my gosh, you could go anyway. But as long as you have the intention in your heart that you're coming from a place of integrity, authenticity, really honoring yourself and the person there. And I say both, because you're both having an energy exchange, you're both working together, then, usually it comes a good outcome, right?
Yeah. And I was going to ask, my perspective on tarot readings, let's say there was an ideal way to operate, which would be they take all of the thoughts that you've kind of had mulling around, like all the things that are in your kind of psychic energy field, and then lay it out in a really concise way during that time, where they're like, okay, like this is kind of where your patterns and mindsets are at. And then potentially, if there was going to be any forecasting, it would be on the current path you're on, it could go this way. These are the potential outcomes, X, Y, Z. But never going to, this is your future in a concrete way. Would you agree with that or change that definition?
No, I agree, because it's, like I said, it's for that moment in time, when you get that information come through, because, I use this example in the book because I was editing it today. So it's like, if you're running for the lift and the person chooses to hold it open for you or not, can change the trajectory for both of you, So they choose to hold it open. And then when they get to the bottom, the person that held the lift open, he walks into a meeting, it all goes well. Instead, he chose not to hold the door open, and he ran out of the lift and then ran into a person, coffee spilt down him, was late for a meeting, ended up missing out a promotion.
Butterfly effect.
It's just, yeah, exactly. And it can just be that one decision. And no one knows, we have kind of, you want to imagine you've got a fate or a destiny or whatever it might be. But we also have the freedom to choose. There's the law of free will, and we have divine will. We have a freedom to choose all the time. We can choose to stay where we are, or we can choose to keep leveling up. And even through my own experience, I had this vision of opening like a healing center, And then my vision exploded. And now it's like, hey, let's create a new education system. And, so based on nourishment and love and curiosity and joy. And all of a sudden, my trajectory changed and everything around me started to change, like where I want to live and what I want to do, because my goals and my signposts shifted. I've still got my sole purpose of serving people and sharing and, speaking, but the actual vision shifted. And with that, I had to change too. And then all those previous timelines all faded away and had to reconstruct a new one because I quantum leapt. So, yeah. So
something I was going to touch on there, which going back to the guy who, let's say, doesn't open or does open the elevator for someone. And let's say the choice point there is between service to others or service to self, essentially. And then, yeah, maybe the service to self, close the elevator, spills into someone or walks into someone that spills coffee into them. And yeah, the defining point was, were they prioritizing themselves or others, and which trajectory pathway did that put them on?
Yeah.
Something I've thought about, which you basically said, is where does our free will versus destiny overlap? And what I've considered is we have particular plot points that are destined for us. Maybe there's a car accident at a certain point. Maybe there's a meeting of someone at another point. And let's say those things are destined to happen. But like you said, it's our free will in how we respond to them. One person might have the car accident and go off the rails and, completely go down a darker timeline, whereas another person might use it for time to reset and get to a more aligned timeline. So,
yeah, and it's those moments in life of the trauma and the tragedies. It's where our bodies and our minds get a chance to either grow from the challenge and learn, bring in forgiveness, bring in gratitude, and it's funny because we work a lot when I do coaching, we work a lot on our wounds and how to actually see what we learnt from them and what it gifted us, so, for example, when I was at school, I always, never felt like I fit in but what it taught me was I got really good at learning and observing people because I wasn't, I put on a mask after mask, but I could easily shift between the two because I was watching what other people were doing and observing that and fitting in this pseudo version of myself based on what I'd observed and listened, which now makes me hear under what people say and I can help them through emotional things a lot better. So I found the lesson in that and how to grow from that instead of, like you said, choosing to stay in that victim mindset and stay in that, why this happened to me? And, shit happens, honestly.
Yeah.
That's just life. And if it was easy, then we wouldn't be choosing to reincarnate on Earth at this time because we choose to come here to learn these lessons and level up. And I always think, I want to heal it. I want to feel it. I want to shift through it because I don't want to reincarnate and have to do it all again,
Yeah, absolutely. And something that seems really critical to our journey and I guess moving towards our higher self is the self-responsibility that we can take and really, I guess, owning all parts of our experience, but also recognizing some things do happen to you, which, you don't want to take responsibility for. Like you want to be healthy in that, be like, okay, that happened and it's not acceptable, but, I accept it. I don't resist what is, but also hold the people accountable that need to be, if so, but also.
And I guess that's where you get really clear on what you want and, being really clear on what your standards are and what your values are and what your truth is as well. And not compromising on that, because when we compromise on it, then we're kind of cheating ourselves, and these things can happen to us and you can choose how you react to it and you can choose what you learn from it rather than being stuck in this cycle of blame. So it's something, I have a little one and we've been trying to teach him, you don't always have to blame everything. Sometimes things just happen and we just go, okay, it happened, rather than we have this human nature default that we want to blame somebody and find a reason for it rather than, oh, the tree fell down and hit the house, okay.
Yeah. 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 That's the other side of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was going to say as well, there's a concept I've been mulling over lately, which is, we all know life happens to you, life happens for you. What about life happens because of you?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, actually, I have a funny story about this. So I was pushing really hard and I was not listening to my body and I wasn't resting. And I was driving and dropping my husband off to work. And for some reason, when I was pulling over to the curb, instead of pulling over gently, I ended up going like really sharp. And I swear I did not pull the steering wheel that hard. There was some divine intervention. Mind you, the weeks before that, I kept thinking, I need to change my tires. I need to change my tires. I need to change my tires. So I somehow managed to hit this perfect bit of the gutter that punctured my tire. So I had no choice but to get new tires. So my poor husband's there before he goes to work, changing my tire for me. And then I was like, oh, all right, I really got to listen to my body. I could relate it. I really need to listen to my body and actually, take some care and book in some appointments and do a tune-up, like follow that through. So then I kept pushing and the next day of getting my tires changed and again had this intuitive hit. I really need to change the battery in my car. So then the tire people ring me up and they said, it's all done, but we're just letting you know that your battery won't kick over at all. And so then I was like, I really need to rest, to the point that my batteries were discharged. So my internal life had externally come through my car. So
you were tired.
That's it. I needed to rest. I needed a tune up. And instead of actually listening to that and doing that, I kept pushing and pushing and pushing to the point that my car broke down and I went, okay, universe, I get the message. I'm going to rest, so.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And how often is it when you do have like an intuitive or just think about something, oh, I've got to do this, and then you let it go a little bit too long and then fate or universe, life steps in and you get the consequence when you're like, oh, I really should have listened to myself there.
Yeah, and intuition's meant to be acted upon immediately, right?
Yeah,
I get this intuitive hit, I'm going to go with it. Instead, we so often just will put it in the drawer and forget about it and then be like, oh, yeah. And a lot of people have learned to numb or switch off their intuition. But I say to people, especially like parents, how often do you feel that something's about to happen to your child and you go prevent it before something really crazy happens? So you have this feeling they're going to jump out of the high chair, or you have this feeling they're going to pull something on themselves. And before it actually happens, you're already over there stopping it. And that is a true example of your intuition and you acting on it really quickly, because it's sometimes it's a life or death situation, right? So why can we do it so quickly for our children, but not for ourselves?
Yeah. Would you say that comes from which of these two scenarios? Is it you have such a connection to their energy that you can almost sense before they're about to do it where they're kind of about to move their energy to? Or is it that you're able to intuitively sense the impending timeline about to be set upon and you're like, well, no?
Or both. It can be both. You've got...
As it usually is.
Yeah, and especially with children, you have this really beautiful connection with them as you're the parent, and you can actually, as a parent, when I found this out, it was so cool, you can actually tune in with your child's higher self to see what's really going on for them. So as long as you do it in the right way and have a really nice connection, and you might call in someone to protect you, however that resonates for you. But, and I got told it's until they're 16 you can do this. So my son was really down and I connected in with his higher self and got told, oh, Mum, I just need to hear these words that you feel me, you see me, and you love me. So I started saying when he went to bed, and his whole demeanor just changed. I had another friend and we connected with her son, and her son, he was really loud, like he'd come into wherever he was and be yelling and screaming, but not in a mean way. It was just like, hey, I'm here. like being really loud and present. And I said, he just wants to be heard. All you need to say to him each night is, I hear you and I love you just as you are. So she started doing that. And after a week, he was a completely different child. So we have these beautiful gifts if we choose to tap into them. And it's such a beautiful way to connect with your child. But then my child's a little bit savvy in terms of intuition and spiritually. And I was trying to do some healing on him because he had a fever. And I went and checked him with his higher self and was like, nah, I don't want any healing. I want you to stay home from work so that we can spend the day together. I was like, that's not happening. And it's your choice. If you don't want the healing, that's fine. So it's just funny. Like little humans crack me up all the time.
Yeah, yeah. And do you know what was standing out to me there? There's so much in the way of how you were describing a child coming in and wanting to be seen, and how many parents without the awareness would be like, be quiet, stop and suppress that. And then that need is like increasing more, and they might act in more undesirable, unlovable ways. And the parent keeps suppressing it. It keeps increasing. And how much that occurs to us as adults with our inner child, where there's a part of us not being seen, heard, felt by ourselves, and then it continues to express in unlovable ways.
Yeah. And just, I always say with that, think of how much better your life would be if you actually healed all that inner child stuff the moment it happens.
Yeah.
Rather than, putting it all down and pushing it down and just creating this little version of yourself that needs to come back and be loved and, usurped and that sort of thing. And often when children act out, it is because they want to be seen or they want to be heard or, they want to be acknowledged. And the other thing that I found too is a lot of children, they need to help understanding their emotions. It's crazy. We come in as humans to have this human experience, and there's a lot of people that call Earth the emotional university of the galaxy, right?
Makes sense.
Yeah. Yep. And everyone's like, yep, I get that. So, we come in here to have emotional experience, but we don't get taught how to feel emotions, how to express emotions, and we just get taught to push them down. And this is why anger, we're just talking about this before we started recording, but anger is such a big thing that gets suppressed. If you keep pushing down anger, it's going to explode. And that's when you have one person say something to you and it triggers you and you just take it out on them. All they might have said was, I don't like your hair. It might have been something really little and it was enough to explode. And if you continue to ignore it, then it comes out in your body as dis-ease. And then all of a sudden you're having all these issues with your body, I keep losing my voice because every time I try and say the truth, I bite it back down. So I don't need a voice. That's essentially what you're telling your body to do, or, I'm really angry, but I'm going to keep pushing down, be frustrated in anger. Oh, your liver all of a sudden is now struggling to work, have fatty liver syndrome, all these other things keep coming up as well. So, the best thing sometimes we can do for children is to help them understand their emotions. Yeah, I can see you're angry. We need to let it out, and even when you're feeling that, label it. I'm really angry at the moment. I just really wanted you to do that and it didn't happen. And I'm frustrated because I just want you to eat your breakfast, and just labeling it. And then they're not feeling that it's theirs because kids are little emotional radars. They can feel what's going on with you, the parent.
Yeah. Absolutely. I was going to ask, do you think there's benefit to saying like, there's anger within me, like, having like distance rather than like identification, like I am angry versus there is anger? It doesn't really.
I don't feel it matters because in that moment you are angry and it's okay to be friends with your anger. It's teaching us that, especially children, it's teaching that you can be angry, but it's how we express that anger and how we use it not to hurt other people.
Yeah.
Rather, we just need to find a healthy way, whether it's, as an adult, you might go box a lot. I did. I went through this really angry period of my life. I was boxing and hitting that bag all the time, or you might stomp your foot or you might need to scream into a pillow, whatever it might be, but you're just teaching them not to take it out on other people, or punch a hole in the wall or something like that. So,
really, sorry.
Oh, I was going to say it's part of being human. just
Yeah.
saying, yeah, I'm human. Yeah.
I was going to say it's really valuable for them to experience anger in the household and know that it's still safe, that you can do that and nothing bad happens, and it's okay to express it in a healthy way, like you just said.
Yeah. And, and then labeling the other, like the happy emotions and the joy. We're so quick to label emotions as good or bad, but they're neither. They're just as an experience. They're just our body letting us know that something's agreeing with it or not agreeing with it. And we need to let them out and let that be expressed in some way. And the amount of people I've met who, will say to me, I never cry. And I was like, oh, it's not a great thing. I wouldn't be boasting about that. You know, you just got to let it out at some point. And even I had a client like that, and we were doing this session and she was so close to crying. And I was like, come on, like because she just needed that release, and I could see if she could do it. And I could almost see the tear coming. And then it was almost like, no, 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 I don't cry. It's almost did that label and step into it. Yeah.
Well, you know what's interesting? I don't cry a lot. It's been years since I've cried, actually. And I want to, it just doesn't come up. But when I'm watching a movie, and it could be something like Harry Potter, and I'll be like sitting there like weeping, like it's really funny that, like, I don't know whether that's a safety thing, like I'm in my own comfort zone and then it feels safe to release that, or if there's like, a bit of a mindset around real life not crying at certain things. I don't know.
Yeah, it can be really tricky because sometimes it can be that whole stereotype, that only girls cry. That's such a big one. Like boys don't cry. That sort of thing. And and it's all that kind of, it's again that, like you were saying, that safety feeling. And I'm like that too. I'll watch certain movies, and I'm just there bawling my eyes out. And I'm like, he just was excited to see his mum again. It's not even something that should be that emotional.
Absolutely. Yep.
And yet when I'm there bawling my eyes out, and, I find too, like, occasionally, I don't cry often, but there'll be a moment where, a few weeks ago, I was in this very, when all your wounds come back up. So often when, people think that we heal the wounds, they're done. It's not the case, because when you level up in life, all those old wounds come back up again to remind you that they're still there. And you have to make friends with them. So for me, I was about to submit this novel, and I'm like, I'd written the 90,000 words. I'd, edited it. I did all the hard work, and all I had to do was write a synopsis and a little bio and submit it. That's all I had to do. So the easy part, right? I went into shutdown. I went into self-doubt. I started crying. There's no way I'm good enough. I can't believe I did this. I can't do this. I can't submit it. And my husband's there going, what happened here? Like, what's it?
Got to this point and then it's all just...
And it was one thing he said to me, and it wasn't horrible. It wasn't anything. It was just enough to like pop this little happy bubble I'd been put around myself, and all the doubt and everything came in, and I'm just there bawling my eyes out. And I was like, and he's like, I'm sorry. I said, don't be sorry. You didn't do anything. It's just all the crap, it's all back. And, and it's about going in that moment. Usually if I would go in that state previously, I would stay like that for a few days, feel depressed and anxiety and all those fun things. But I pulled myself back out of it by pushing through and actually doing what I needed to do. Felt like I was dragging this massive rock behind me when all I'm riding free. And then I was like,
just get you to stop for 2 secs there, Catherine. I think your Wi-Fi is dropping out. It's on red and you're glitching for me.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but the video's paused. Huh.
I don't know. Let me try. I'll turn my video off and then I'll turn it back on. Let me try that and see if that resets it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's saying for me, Catherine's network bandwidth is low.
So weird.
Yeah.
Might have just been the satellites moving.
Yeah.
Is my back now?
Yeah, I think so. It's gone white. Let's proceed.
Okay. Um, yeah, so all I had to do was do this last bit of the book, but it was like dragging through, like just to get it done and get it happening, and like, wow, like why is this so hard? And then I forgot to celebrate it. You know, we do these things, these like big things, or tick something off our list, and we forget to celebrate. So then we don't get the dopamine hit, and then we don't want to keep doing it. So, you know, and my coach called me on it, and he's like, hey, you know, did you celebrate that? It was a big achievement. I'm like, no, actually, I didn't do anything. Like, I just kept writing. I just wrote I kept writing, you know, like I was just like, no. So my husband's like, right, we're going out to dinner and we're celebrating. And then when I finished the first draft of Spiritual Ethics, I danced around the kitchen, you know, and I was like really excited and really celebrating me. Completely different experience.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think that's such an important thing to remember, that we need to celebrate as well.
100%. I've been so to blame for not celebrating the productivity, the things I've achieved. I've definitely fallen into, okay, got that done. Okay, and what's the next thing? And you're right, over time, because the way I like to think about it is you're putting energy into something. You want to kind of withdraw your energy deposits at some point. So then you've got compounding interest and more to return, more to invest the next time.
Exactly. We forget to refuel.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we have a car with a flat battery and flat tires.
Yeah, exactly. When you were talking about doing a spiritual tune-up for yourself, what kind of practices do you do for that?
Yeah, so it depends. So I kind of intuitively follow what comes through. So sometimes it might be like I need to go to a chiropractor. Sometimes I've got like this really beautiful person I see for intuitive massage, you know, so she really works on what needs to come up. Sometimes I'll go to a homeopath, a naturopath. I also, I actually just got one too. I do a lot of rife frequency work. So where, if anyone doesn't know what rife is, it's this really cool, like it's so clever. So it will measure your body's frequencies and come up with things that are in balance, and then it will put the frequencies back in your body to rebalance it. So it's really, really powerful. It's really good for detoxing, you know, helping shift cells that shouldn't be there. You know, it's just, we just got one today and I'm so excited I'm currently on a protocol, because the other cool thing about it is because it works with energy. You can actually put your fingernails or toenails in it, and your toenails and fingernails carry your DNA for 6 months after you cut them. So it will still work on your energy field, even though your fingernails and toenails are detached from your body in the machine. So you can leave it in the machine whilst you're sleeping and doing whatever you want to do, and you're getting these treatments all the time.
Interesting. I was thinking rife was something else to do with copper and crystals, and by the sounds of that, maybe it's not.
Well, it can have that aspect too. So if you need, because I bought this frequency harmonizer to go with it as well. So if I want to, I can put like a crystal on one side and have distilled water or something on the other side I want to charge it into, and it will help translate that frequency into the water or into whatever you want to put it into. So it can have that aspect as well. And it can come through with the copper too, because copper is really powerful for our body. We've just kind of forgotten how to use it. So all our gardening tools used to actually be made of copper. So when we would garden, we would actually charge up the soil with copper. And copper is amazing. If you put a copper rod in your garden, it actually makes everything grow better, but it also helps repel a lot of the bugs. So we have copper pipes in our strawberry patch, and our strawberry patch went insane this year. We had this massive abundance of strawberries. Yeah.
Yeah, have to test that out.
Yeah, there's a whole study. I can't think of the word right now, but it's really, really interesting. So, yeah, but yeah, sorry.
Was the rife machine expensive?
It was about 2,500 Australian. So,
Okay, yeah.
which I don't think is ridiculous, because I saw it as an investment in my health.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm excited to start playing with it, and it has such infinite possibilities. Like apparently you can even, if you have a plant that's struggling, you can bring a leaf in and put it in it and then put frequencies through and the plant will improve. So the coolest thing with that is there's actually studies that have come out. So I think it was NASA possibly did this study, and they took blood and they took it out to space, and then they showed these people that they'd taken the blood from like a scary movie. And when you're scared, your blood reacts differently and your body does all these different like constrictions, so you can go into that flight run state. Your adrenals kick in, and in space at the exact same time the blood reacted the same way.
Yeah, that's
So
very interesting. Definitely going to look
yeah.
that up, because what would that be? The quantum field that we're connected with?
Yep, correct. So it's even like, I like to think of it too as, when people lose a limb, and the limb, they still feel the limb is there. They still move like the limb is there. They can sometimes still feel the pain depending on how they lost that limb, because the body and your energy field is still making up for that being there. So, how we exchange energy with people and how that flows on too. We're all energetic beings. So when we interact with people or have relationships, then that then tends to translate where we take on their energy. And that's why we have to be really mindful of where we put our energy and who we
Connect with.
yeah, exactly. Mate with, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's perhaps a physical interaction that happens on like, a microbe level as well. But how much do you think a cord cutting process can help you cut ties? Like, do you think if you've connected with someone previously, there's spiritual hygiene practices you can do to get back to your own energy?
Yeah, it depends how to explain that. It depends how thick the cord is. So often when I'm working with people's DNA in the quantum field and energetically, how big that connection is and how much it impacts on you, it will determine how hard it is to remove that cord. So, and sometimes it hooks in. I've had to help people because I don't always get to remove it because it's not mine. I can guide people to remove it because it's their choice to make it. But I've had clients where it's like hooked in like a barb, and they like have to fully yank it out, and they like have to physically yank this thing out before it will detach itself. I've had other ones where it was so entangled with family that it was like this big, thick, chunky cord. And I was like, oh my goodness, we have so much work to do. And it's almost like we had to undo each of the bands, if you imagine like a think rope, right?
Yep.
To
Yep.
undo each band in order to disconnect the cords. So sometimes it is as simple as saying, I choose to cut this cord, and saying that 3 times, or I renounce this relationship, or I renounce this connection, and just send love back, because we want to fill the void. Because if we cut something, there's going to be an empty space. We want to fill it with something we do want. That's why people will go, send love and light. And people go, why? Well, we need to fill the empty space with something. Otherwise, you're going to have the same energy come back in, because like attracts like. So having a good hygiene practice where you cut those cords but and disconnect is really powerful. And that was really highlighted to me when I was doing medical intuitive work, because I could feel people's pain. And so I could help them and understand where their pain was coming from. And if I didn't disconnect it properly and really clean out my system, I would get their symptoms. So it was a really good lesson for me on how to get really good at cleaning my field out and making sure that things weren't attached to me anymore. But it still happens. We still go, and sometimes it can be a really sneaky thing. Like you think someone's aligned with you or whatever, and then it turns out they're not. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, where's my energy going?
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. What practices would you do to clean your field?
So there's a beautiful one a friend shared with me, and it's so simple. So just as you're going to sleep, you can visualize, meditate, imagine, whatever works for you. I know a lot of people run away from meditate, so you can visualize or imagine, and that you're in a field, and then at your feet around you, there's like a rock circle. And anyone inside that circle, you need to push them and get them out, or ask them nicely. Even if it's your child, you ask them to leave. They can stay close, but they can't be on the inside. And then you pull in a beautiful colored light and you kind of wash that, and it's actually clearing your field, and it's getting anyone inside that to step out. And it's such a simple practice, but it's so easy and quick. And if you do it before you go to sleep, then you're not going to have dreams filled with all these connections of things that you don't even want.
And it's such a strongly defined boundary as well that I think that would really help.
Yeah, agreed. That I found is the simplest way to describe it, because depending on how the thought is attached to you, it can be really tricky to detach. And another thing to remember too is that those cords is what influences our DNA expression too. So, when we're talking about spiritual epigenetics, so epigenetics means, it's a term, you can look it up. It actually means how your DNA is expressed. So if you ever hear about, twins, identical twins, right? So they have exactly the same DNA, but when one grows up in a different household to the other one, how they express it is completely different, because it's how we're conditioned, our beliefs, what happens to us, what trauma, what wounds. And so even though they start with the exact same patterning and DNA sequences, they still have a completely different expression. So those cords is what actually stops our gene expression from that beautiful divine blueprint that we came into the world with. From the moment we're born, we're starting to be influenced by all these things around us, which stops our DNA from expressing how it should.
Yeah, that's a really interesting concept because I think people can fall into kind of two ends of the spectrum where, everything's occurring in the energetic realm that's expressing in the body. And then on the other hand, let's say the physiology that we've exposed ourselves to, like pathogens, environmental toxins, etc., is causing, detriment to the body and maybe some emotional regulation as well. Like we've kind of stated already, everything kind of interacts and there's a two-way feedback system. What affects you in the energetic comes in the body. Sometimes what you expose yourself to in the physical attaches in the energetics.
Yeah. And it's often like kind of that three levels. So you've got your physical, you've got your mind and your emotions, and then you've got your soul stuff too, because often we can carry through karmic baggage that we need to, transmute through or release or cancel or whatever it might be in this lifetime. And that's going to impact you as well. So we have these so many different aspects affecting our DNA. And then all of a sudden, different things get switched off, different things get activated that wouldn't normally. So I often have clients who'll go, it's so unfair because, I eat really well, I do all this stuff to help my body, and yet I still ended up with this and my family didn't, and they, don't treat their body really well. And then I'll say, well, this one client I've got in mind, I said, well, you had a near-death experience and they didn't, so of course you're going to be triggered to express your DNA differently because you had to go into literal fight for your life. So, and this client had multiple near-death experiences. So I'm like, again, you've had all these things happen to you and you have to give grace to that. And she says, I want to change out the victimhood. And I'm like, okay, well, that's your choice again. That's your choice, how you handle that and how you move through that. And the cool thing is that nothing is set in stone. Like, it's all energy. We can change it.
100%. But what I did mean to ask you before was, with the pillars of your book, off the top of your head, what were some of the pillars?
Yeah. We've got divine will, which is obviously freedom of choice and that sort of thing. Authenticity, very important. And that I find something that was a word that was kind of a trend word recently. Everyone's like, be authentic. And then they'd say, go drink all this water and don't drink this. And then in the background, they're doing the very opposite. That for me is like very much, well, that's not being authentic. Presence is another one. Willingness to change, spiritual responsibility, equality, and accountability. So they're the main pillars. And then you've also got know yourself and others. So really knowing yourself so that if you're in a session and get triggered, you can own that and move through it rather than letting it influence people around you. That we are human, and to remember that we're human. And then the other thing is connecting with back to nature and back to Mother Earth, because we are nature and we come from nature and we forget that. And it's such an integral part of our being, and it's really important to be connected.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're all very key points. And do you know what I think is really important about authenticity, not just being in the spiritual or, self-help field even, but for everyone, when you're in a state of authenticity, congruence with your truth, that typically has you in a state of expansion more than contraction. Because, when you lie or you just got internal conflict, that can really cause your energy to become tense and stop that energy flow. And I think that's probably leading more to sympathetic activation rather than parasympathetic. And what I've been thinking about lately is how when we're in our most highest well-being is when our authentic self tends to come through.
Mm. And when we step into our truth as well, so I've been talking to a lot of the clients I've got who I coach. We've been talking a lot about watching your words. So even something as simple as "How are you?" and you'll say "I'm good," but really you're dying inside. Because we're not honoring ourselves and we're actually misspeaking, and our words carry that frequency. We've all seen that Emoto water experiment. If you haven't, look it up. It's really cool. But and how much our words have meaning and how what we choose to say really impacts on what we think of ourselves and how we express ourselves to others. So I'm like, well, instead of saying "I'm good," you can just say "I'm okay. There are lots of things going on for me right now." And then you're still honoring yourself. You don't have to give too much away because it might be a protective thing, but you're also not lying and saying you're good when you're really not.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because there would be times where, let's say, like you're at the supermarket checkout and you're not want to be like, "Oh, actually," but by saying
Exactly.
something like you suggested, you could still remain authentic, but
Yeah.
honor
The whole life story to this poor person that just wants to scan your groceries. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So we're coming to the end of the hour. I was going to ask two questions. And one was, what do you think the world needs most right now?
Feelings, like actually feeling into their pain, feeling and healing. You got to feel it to heal it. If you're not feeling it and pushing it down, you're going to end up with disease. You're going to end up, your body's going to shut down. And if you keep ignoring it, you end up in tragedy, So, and what I definitely mean by that is, I've had it happen to me. I kept ignoring. I had a sore toe to the point that I ended up breaking it, So because I was ignoring all these signs that was coming through, these synchronicities and everything. So yeah, feeling it. Like, imagine if everyone actually sat there and felt what was really going on for them, how different would the world be?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. The getting caught in doing rather than being is a framework I really gravitate towards, where I personally know when I'm too focused on the external and not enough on the internal, that's typically when I'm just, stressed and not really living my authentic self.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And the other question, an easy one, where can people find you and what are
Yeah.
you offering?
Okay, so you can check out my website, which is willowhealing.org, which actually has an app attached to it. So if you like, you can download the app and it's got all our offerings on there. So we have
Awesome.
courses that you can check out. You can subscribe to a membership where you get access to everything for as long as you need it. We've got coaching as well. So we've got group coaching and also one-on-one coaching. And how I do coaching is I actually look into your spiritual path, and then we see how we can help you get to the highest thing, and also empowering you how to do that yourself. I find that so important. I don't want to hold your hand the whole way. I want to push you so you run and glide, in a tenderly loving way with some tough love as well.
Nice.
And yeah, exactly. You can also find me on Substack, so willowhealing.substack.com. That's where I've got my newsletter. That's where I write what everything's happening. I've got a retreat coming up at the start of August called From Ordinary to Extraordinary, which I'm very excited about. It's in Byron Bay on an organic farm where we will be very much nourished. And I've got my coach who's an international speaker coming out too. So we will definitely have a lot to offer with that too. And then if you want to find me on Instagram or Threads, it's just Willow Healing SH. And yeah, and if you want a healing session or an intuitive session or a channel and just see what's going on for a one-off too, I've got that available too. And then I have offerings for little humans. So I run magic camps and nature camps too. Yeah.
Oh, that's a really cool offering. I'll make sure that I add some links into the podcast notes, and yeah, everyone can link up and check it out.
Beautiful.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on the Chi podcast.
Yeah, it's been amazing. I love that it just flowed and we went down many rabbit holes.
Yeah. I think it's good when you can do that and just like roll and flow into a good breadth of topics.
Exactly.
Yeah.